Hi there, it's Simon Hurley from Inklips and welcome to another video. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Now, I often struggle making really quick cards, but today I'm going to share a really fun and easy way to get really fast stamp layered results that look beautiful using the MISTI stamping tool. Now, I have to admit, I haven't created cards in a little while here, so I was really struggling to be inspired during this video, but I have to say I made a bunch of different examples, and just stamping out these stamp layering sets really make it easy to build a beautiful card. So I'm using this Build a Flower Sakura Blossom stamp set from Altenew. It has these amazing layered flowers as well as those really cool sentiments that cover lots of different occasions. And you also have the dies to cut out the flowers and score them to create some really awesome and stunning 3D flowers on your cards. So I'm starting off by taking the most solid images out from my stamp set here and laying them down in my MISTI, leaving just a little bit of room so I can cut them out with the dies later. And then I'll pick those up and we can start our stamping here. Now I have to say, you're going to see lots of ink pad colors throughout the video. I'm not going to name them all, but I'll have them linked down below in the description or over at my blog if you're interested in any of the colors. So now I have these in the exact same spot as I'm stamping over and over, so all I need to do to change this is just pull out that piece of cardstock and add a new piece of cardstock in, and then you can continue your stamping. You just want to make sure that if you're switching colors, you clean your ink off in between, but I'm just going to stamp lots of the panels like this and keep moving my cardstock out and cleaning my stamp. So now you'll see this pink example here. And also a nice part about having it in the exact same spot is in case if I want to make the color a little bit darker or if I've made a mistake, the MISTI really helps to line it back up over top of that image and stamp it down again. So you'll see I've kept these two solid images in here, not moving them, and I'm making a bunch of different panels with this. This might seem a little boring and kind of extensive at the beginning, but trust me, in the long run it saves you lots of time and you can bust out a bunch of these flowers in no time. Also, I do want to mention that some of the formulas of these ink pads do soften and smooth out over time, but they start out a bit splotchy, so don't be too worried about that at the beginning. Now I've taken one of these panels that I just stamped with those images, and I'm going to take out the second most solid images in this, the ones that layer right on top, and I'll line these right over top of the images that I just stamped. And then I'll pick that up with my MISTI lid here, and we can get back to our stamping. Now this just ensures that they're in the exact same spot as before, so they'll layer up perfectly, and this is a huge time saver, so you don't have to keep going over top of the same image. You can just keep stamping and you know that they're going to be in the exact same spot. Now I wanted to mention that you do not need a MISTI to stamp these stamp layering sets. They do take a little bit longer, but you can still get the same amazing results just with an acrylic block and looking over top of it to make sure your stamp is aligned. So there are lots of ways to do this. This is just a really quick time saver as you're working. Now as I was stamping all these, I ended up testing a bunch of different color combos here. So you'll see lots of the Altenew inks, and I used quite a bit of those, but I kind of mix and matched them as well. Like here you'll see the pink and the yellow go together, and that actually ended up being one of my favorites in the end. So you kind of just want to play with it. The colors look a little bit more stark right at the beginning when you stamp them, but they definitely smooth out and blend a little bit together as well. Now I'm going to take the center portion of the flowers, line them up, and pick them up with the acrylic portion of the MISTI, and then we can get back to our stamping. So I'm going to take this one color of ink here, and since it's in the exact same spot, I can go over it several times to make the center a little bit darker, and then you can kind of stretch your ink pads like that if you don't have a ton of different colors. So then I can pull that piece of cardstock out, add a new panel in here, and then I can continue my stamping in the exact same spot. Now if you're struggling with coming up with ink color combos that go together really nicely, I know it's hard to coordinate some of the shades really well together. I know Altenew really has some really well thought out ink pad collections that have 4 different colors that really do coordinate well together, and I used quite a few of them in today's video, so I'll have them linked down below in the description box, the ones that I used, and I've been using them for quite some time and have had lots of luck with them, so I just wanted to mention that in case if you struggle coming up with different color combinations. So I'm just quickly finishing off stamping all these little centerpieces inside the flowers there, and I really love how these look once they're all layered together like this. So now I'm going to add some of the leaves, and it doesn't matter where you add them on this sheet, you just want to make sure there's enough space for the dies later on, because we're going to be cutting everything out of these sheets. So I've added the more solid images down, and these will be the lighter ones here, but I wanted lots of different variation in the leaves, so I'm going to use that simple trick where I take the same ink pad color and I stamp it down twice on one of the panels, and then I'll stamp it once on the other panels to make it nice and light. So by using this trick, you get lots of variation out of one ink pad, but I actually did end up going in with a darker ink pad as well to get even more variation in the leaves. I really like when there's lots of different greens going on there. So I'm stamping all of them down onto the panels here, really simply, and you'll notice some of them are splotchy, and like I said, they do sink in a little bit more to the paper and give almost like a velvety kind of blended feel in the end. So as I'm stamping these leaves here, it's all going in the exact same spot. You just want to make sure your paper is nice and butted up against that corner, and you don't really even need the magnet to hold your paper down. So then I'm taking those lined images. I looked right over top of the stamp, made sure they were super nice and lined up, and then I'll go in with the darker color here, and this is one of those Altenew ink pairs, and I'll go in with the darker color and stamp it right over top. So I get that nice detail right over top of those leaves as well. Now some of them I'll stamp once and twice as well to get some more variation going in here. And with these lighter ones, I chose a little bit of a lighter color to go right over top. So I'm just going to continue stamping those leaves down, and you might actually want to stamp a couple more than the amount of flowers that you have, because I find you use up the leaves a little bit faster on the cards. So then I'll be stamping down the little inside portion of the flower here. Now I didn't end up using this on all the different flowers, but I think it looks pretty nice, and I used it on a couple of them for some variation in the ending. So here I just chose some of the colors that go really well with some of those flowers there. And like I said, here I was just really testing with some of the different color combos and kind of really just playing around with them. So some of them didn't end up too great, and I didn't end up using all of them on the end cards. Now to make sure that your colors are super clean as you're stamp layering this whole time, I like to spray some Hero Arts Ultra Clean onto a little rag, and I just wipe off the different stamps in between each color. This makes sure your color is super clean and you won't have different colors transferring to one another as you're stamping down the different stamps. So I'm just going to continue stamping these centers here until I have them all completed with the different colors of inks that I'm using. So after I've stamped all my flowers down, I can move on to die cutting the flowers now, and this will kind of turn them into 3D embellishments onto our cards. So here are all the different panels that I stamped. There's quite a few of them in there, and now we're moving on to die cutting all of these out. Now there's not a super fast way to do this, I have to say, but I did add a little bit of frog tape to each one of these dies, and these are solid dies, so you can't see right through them. However, when these die cut out, you do have a little bit of room that you can see some of the color on the outside of the die, so that's how you can kind of know that it's lined up as you're lining these down and taping them to your cardstock. So you just want to make sure that you can see a little bit of a border of some of the color there, and that's how you know that they're going to cut out really nicely. And you have a little bit of leeway as you're running these through because the images are actually bigger than the die cuts will cut out. So I didn't find any way to cut these out any faster than I was doing, but I didn't find the work to be too tedious since you don't have to line them up perfectly every time. So I just kind of lined them up around the general area where they were and saw that little border on the outside, and all of them cut out completely fine. And I do use the delicate frog tape to tape down all of these dies, and I find that it doesn't rip my cardstock or give me any problems, but it works really nicely for keeping them in place as you're running it through your machine. So after I've die cut all those images here, we can then start on our backgrounds and assembling our cards. Now I have to admit, when I first saw this stamp set, I was really drawn to these sentiments here. I feel like they're super well thought out, and they really go along nicely with this set, as well as really just any everyday sentiments. So they have some really nice scripty font on them, and I wanted to use that in the background of the cards, but some of them also have just typography along with the sentiment, and I didn't really want that repetitively in the background. So I decided that I was just taking the image and some fine scissors here, so I'm using the little Tim Holtz scissors. And this just helps me cut through the stamp really nicely. I promise they're not screaming, but I'm just cutting right around that sentiment, making sure that I don't cut any of the sentiment off, and you just want to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now if you don't feel comfortable cutting your stamps here, you can always just mask off that area pretty creatively with some tape, but you can always apply this sentiment back together and stamp it how it was originally intended, so I don't really have any problem with cutting my stamps, since I end up getting a little bit more use out of them anyway. So once we're all finished cutting our sentiments out, we can then move on to stamping our backgrounds. Now I wanted these to be a little bit more muted so that our flowers would really stand out. So for this first one, I'm using this light gray color, and I'm using my sympathy stamp here. And I'm going to just kind of stamp it along the side of the card going upwards, and I'm moving it around so that the brush strokes really fit nicely into each other, but I don't want to obscure the sentiment. I want to make sure it's still nicely readable so I can add it on with one of those sentiments later and make sure that it's still nicely readable there. So for the second card here, I'm taking that same sympathy sentiment in a little bit darker of an ink, and I'm going to stamp it at a diagonal going along the bottom side of our card. Now you can really get better with this and line it all up and use a ruler and things like that. However, since the flowers are what's really going to draw the eye on these cards, I find that I don't need to make the backgrounds really super perfect. So now I'm stamping this treasure word using some really light blue ink, and I'm going to stamp it coming in from the side of the card with kind of a crazy pattern here. I played around with lots of different ways to add these sentiments on, and you can kind of play around with it as well to see what looks good with the flowers that you created. Now for this background here, I used a light yellow ink, and I'm just stamping the word hugs coming in from the right side of the card, and just stamping lots of those down to kind of create a little pattern and little grounding area for our flowers to sit. So now to make our flowers 3D here, I'm going to take them and score them on those crease lines that were created by those dies. And this really helps to fold this together and make it kind of stand out on your card and make it look like an embellishment. So after I've folded all of those and made sure they were nicely shaped, I can then kind of plan out the designs of my cards. Now I have to say I'm definitely not a florist, but I kind of just move the flowers around and see what I like and what looks good to my eye. So you kind of just have to play around with the placement of the flowers. And then I just throw in a couple leaves and stick them into the flowers as well. Now I'm just using tape runner. I find that that sticks pretty nicely, but there are also some really nice liquid adhesives that will work for that as well. And I added some of the flowers up on foam tape to kind of play with the dimension and add some of them up and some of them down lower to add some different variation on our cards. So I've kind of bent up those leaves as well, and all of the pieces have those score lines on them, so you can create some really cool 3D flowers here. And you could even layer up the bottom larger flower with one of those smaller flowers to get a really nice 3D embellishment there. So I'm sticking in some of those leaves, and I like to use different colors and different sizes in some of the different floral arrangements as well. Now you can see that little top piece there. I've die cut that out, and I'm going to add it right on top of that flower. And I kind of like how it looked in the end. I added it to, I think, 3 of the flowers, and I really like how delicate it die cuts out, so it looks really cool in the end on top of those little flowers. So after I've added all my different flower scenes together, I can then move on to adding all the cards together. So I've cut down some of the cards here, cut off a little bit off the edges, and then I'll add them onto some card bases. Now I added some of my cards onto some colored bases from Gina K Designs cardstocks that go nicely with the colors of the flowers that we used today, and I really like how that looked, so I just left some of the color off to the edges. And then on some of them, I just added the full thing onto a white top folding card base, and I think we ended up with a nice variety of cards in the end. Now I actually did take some of those fonts that we cut off the stamps earlier and just stamped them down in black to go along with the sentiments in the background. And then I added some tonic shimmer pen on top of some of these flowers to get some nice shimmer and kind of finish off some of those cards all together. Now to finish off these cards, I just added some Nuvo drops in the center to add a little bit more interest there, and that finishes it off here. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video and learned a little bit more. If you did, please leave it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to click that subscribe button on screen right now if you want to see more videos like this one from me. And also, if you click over to my blog right now, there's much more information about these cards over there, as well as a full supplies list, and be sure to check out this new Altenew stamp set. And I'll see you guys very soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye!